Today we are looking at Kent Hovind's questions and answers, and he gets into some insect stuff here, and I wanted to get a chance to address it. So that is what we are going to be looking at today. So I know I've done Hovind before, and there's a lot of other people that I could cover, but when he brings up insects, I can't not respond. I can't not say something back to him. So let's hear what Mr. Dino has to say, because I'm going to call him Mr. Dino. You are not a doctor.
Do insects have 4 feet? Atheists love to pick on this one. In the book of Leviticus, God's telling them what they can eat and what they cannot eat. Yet these may ye eat of every flying, creeping thing. The locust. It's okay to eat locusts. Remember, John the Baptist lived on locusts and wild honey. A locust is like a grasshopper. The beetle. It's okay to eat a beetle. I had a student when I was in California from, not Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, one of those Southeast Asian countries. One of their favorite foods was some big beetle they have that grows over there. They would get these big beetles, catch them and roast them for a little bit, flip them over and take a spoon and just dig everything out and eat it right out of the shell. That's what they did, okay?
Well, I mean,
just fine.
Okay, and I get the aversion, okay? But I am a proponent of insect protein. I think that eating grasshoppers and beetles, and especially beetle larvae like mealworms and superworms, eating locusts, grasshoppers, at least if they're farmed properly. I don't think I would recommend eating any of them that were collected in the wild, just due to the way that they propagate and the way that they absorb nutrients from their environment when they're in the ground, and all the heavy metals that are in the ground, at least in North America. I would not recommend eating grasshoppers or locusts that you catch outside. But if they were farm raised, or farm raised crickets, farm raised beetles, farm raised, that's protein. That's perfectly edible protein. It will not hurt you.
This pomegranate juice is good.
I too enjoy pomegranate juice.
So of these you can eat the grasshopper. But all other flying, creeping things which have 4 feet shall be an abomination unto you. Atheists love to pick on this one. Say, oh, the Bible doesn't have any science to back it up. We know insects have 6 feet.
That's not, I mean, insects do have 6 feet, but as creeping things, I believe, includes other creatures as well. I think rodents and things like that, which do have 4 feet. The problem that we have is just the vagueness of these categories. Creeping things, flying creeping things. It's all, bats fit into that category. I guess certain birds do. A lot of insects. So, what is this category? It's just so vague.
Bible says they got 4. Focus, Daniel-san. Pay attention, okay? John Combs wrote, here this might pose a genuine problem to any entomologist who does not study the language of the King James Bible. Insects definitely have 6 legs, not 4, according to our way of thinking. Question. Does it say in this verse in Leviticus that you can eat it with 4 legs, or does it say 4 feet?
It says 4 feet. I'm with you.
Stay with me now.
Yeah, I'm with
4
you.
feet. Okay.
4 feet. Right.
Of course, the dishonest skeptic wants the Bible believer to think the writer of Leviticus had never seen a grasshopper, a beetle, a wasp, or a cockroach in his entire life, and was that stupid to think that insects have 6.
That is not what the argument is. The argument is that they're saying that all these things are in a group together. That they're all the same kind, that they're all related, and we're talking about mice, bats, bugs. I guess flying, creeping things. We can scratch mice from that because they don't fly, but they are a creeping thing, I believe, by biblical classification. But flying, creeping things definitely includes bats, and they are not. And I guess it would include anything that flies besides a bird, I suppose. So I don't know if that would include, like, pterosaurs would be flying, creeping things. That hasn't really been defined by the biblical classification system, but I can't think of any other group that pterosaurs would fall into. But it's the fact that they say that all these organisms are the same kind when they're very, very different that's the problem. That's the argument, Ken. Let's stay focused.
4 legs instead of 6. Moses obviously knew that flying, creeping things have 6 legs. The problem here isn't in a scientific error, it's in defining the terms. Before we get to the real problem of verse 23, let's deal with a minor one in verse 21. This is a friend of mine, John Combs, years ago, wrote this. I thought it was classic. Every flying, creeping thing that goeth upon all four. All four what? It doesn't tell you. If the answer is 4 legs or 4 feet, there would not be an error. How do you know? Upon all four is an expression. It's not a literal meaning of crawling and supporting itself on 4 appendages. How do you know? Look at the verse right before it. Fowls are said to go upon all 4.
Because they use their forelimbs for locomotion. Again, and that's fowl spelled wrong there. That's it should be FOWL. But I'm not here to nitpick your spelling. But that's like foul ball. That's what you got there. Fowl. But anyway, back to birds. Birds, fowl, do use their forelimbs for locomotion. That's true. So they don't. If you're about to say, and I know you're about to say that birds move on 2 legs, but they only move on 2 sets of limbs at a time, generally speaking. But and that's generally speaking, because some birds do use their wings and legs as they go to launch themselves into the air for a running start. It depends on the species, but they can't use them in tandem. But they move on. They move with all 4 of their limbs.
Birds go upon all 4. It's an expression for moving, crawling, walking. They only got 2 feet. Now don't sit there and tell me that Moses didn't know that birds only have 2 legs and 2 feet. Don't be that absurd. Going upon all 4 is a human expression defining something that creeps low to the ground. Because when we crawl, we go upon all 4. Now to the real problem. Firstly, the text did not say it had a total of 4 feet. He gave a commandment saying if it had 4 feet, you weren't supposed to eat them if it wasn't in the Levitical list. So looking at it that way, insects do have 4 feet. If they did,
where does that put eating snakes, though? Can you eat snakes since they don't have 4 feet? Was that what Leviticus was really saying? They eat worms and snakes and legless animals?
This honest skeptic faces God one day at the judgment and points out this error in his word, and God used this argument. The skeptic couldn't prove him wrong. Secondly, the insects in Leviticus, when comparing Scripture with Scripture, do have a total of 4 feet. The back 2 sets of appendages are considered legs and the feet, a total of 4, and the front 2 are considered arms and hands.
Oh no. So yeah, if you look at the anatomy of a grasshopper, the front 4 feet are homologous in their structure, whereas the hind legs are unique and different. And you'll see that with beetles too. A lot of beetles do have hyper-developed forelimbs, but they also, but when we're talking about grasshoppers, locusts, they do have hyper-developed hind limbs. So that's these 2 groups are very different. Beetles will have generally hyper-developed forelimbs, and grasshoppers and locusts will have hyper-developed hind limbs.
Did you ever look at insects mentioned in Leviticus? The front 2 appendages shoot forward from the body, while the other 2 sets shoot backward.
Wait.
How do we know the front pair is considered arms and hands?
Wait. Insects mentioned in Leviticus, the front 2 appendages shoot forward from the body, while the other 2 sets shoot backwards. There's only 6 here. There aren't. So, okay. So I never mind. I get it. He's saying the front 2 appendages and then the behind 2 sets. My bad. That was my mistake. I misread that.
Proverbs 30, verse 28. The spider taketh hold with her hands. So beetles.
Yeah. So beetles. All the limbs here are pretty well homologous. The Hox genes are basically mirrors of one another. So all the appendages are homologous.
Beetles have 4 feet and 2 hands. Now we decide to classify them as 6 legs. Well, okay. Does the beetle think that way? I bet he likes having those 2 in front where he can put stuff in his mouth.
I bet that's probably it does. That's not a grasshopper, Kent. That's a locust. It even has the this pupal stage here, and then the adult stage there. That's a locust, not a grasshopper. You are wrong.
4 feet, 2 hands.
See how the front 4 limbs are homologous with one another. They are basically grown with the same genes, the same genetic structure, are just facing different directions, whereas the hind limbs are hyper developed and very unique from the other rear facing limbs.
The spider taketh hold with her hands. In this case, the spider's got 4 hands and 4 feet.
Unless you count the pedipalps. Now, the pedipalps are like if, while you were evolving, while your ancestors were evolving, they decided that the lips were going to turn into hands. That's what pedipalps are, and that's why a lot of spiders, especially like tarantulas and other mygalomorphic spiders, have really well-developed pedipalps, and almost looks like they have 10 legs instead of 8.
4 facing backward, 4 facing forward. So God can explain himself just fine. The fact that spiders have 8 appendages instead of 6, like insects, is irrelevant. It shows that insects in the Bible have both hands and feet, no matter what any entomologist says. The front 2 feet of Leviticus.
What are you categorizing as hands and feet, though? It sounds like you're just asserting that they're hands and feet. What makes a hand? What makes a foot? What about these structures differentiate these from hands and these being feet? Is it just that they're hands if they face forward and their feet if they face backwards? We're going to need some clarification here, Kent, because I'm not following what you're laying down here.
Leviticus, insects are hands, making the beetle have 4 feet, and that's that. So that was John Combs' answer. Okay, questions or comments?
We're going to get into his Ukraine predictions and stuff. I'm not going to continue to watch that. I'll watch a little bit of this. This was the Whack It Atheist Wednesday. AJ, Atheist Jr. is doing the beginning of March is doing a full review of this video, so I'm not going to do a full review, but I do want to watch just some parts of it where he makes some erroneous claims. So about moths and butterflies. Where's the start at? Yeah, we're just going to jump into right here.
Protective coverings for the pupa. After the egg begins to grow, it spins a cocoon around it, or a pupa. The pupa is the intermediate stage between the larva and the adult. A moth makes a cocoon, which is wrapped in silk covering. A butterfly makes a chrysalis, which is hard, smooth, and has no silk covering.
So far, so true. Butterflies are a nested clade within the moth clade. They are daytime specialists for feeding on flower nectar to be pollinators.
Sorry, butterflies are not modified moths. You are mistaken.
Yeah, to use the word modified moths, all individual clades of moths would be modified moths to fill whatever ecological niche that they're in. Butterflies are modified specifically to fill the ecological niche of daytime nectar feeder and pollinator, whereas moths do that service in the dark. Modified moths, and they do have different physiological features to differentiate themselves from other clades of moths, such as their antennae tend to be different. They aren't as feathery because they don't have to depend on so much on the air pressure and things to detect, because they can see because it's daytime and more light enters the lenses, and they're able to visually interpret their surroundings, whereas moths depend a lot on the sounds and vibrations that they feel through their antenna, so they have more developed antenna.
Aaron, or Leon, whatever your first name is, we're going to try to help you see the truth here, okay? Scientists study and discover new species of moths and butterflies. Distinctions between the two are becoming blurred. I'm sure they are, okay. More fascinating facts about butterflies and moths. There are many more species of moths than butterflies. Butterflies and skippers, with a hook-shaped antenna, make up 6 to 11% of the population, of the moth population, okay. While the moths make up 89 to 94% of the Lepidoptera. Let's see, it is not true that if you touch a butterfly's wings, the powder rubs off and the butterfly will not be able to fly. The powder is actually tiny scales. And butterfly sheds these scales throughout their lifetime. Butterflies and moths are holometabulous, meaning they undergo a complete metamorphosis from egg to caterpillar. How could you possibly study biology, Mr. Nelson, at University of Texas and not know that butterflies and moths are different? They certainly are very, very different.
They are different. Their butterflies are a clade within the moth clade that have unique features that differentiate them from their moth ancestors because they've spent tens of thousands of years evolving to fill an ecological niche as a daytime nectar feeder, pollinator of flowers, which really started more so in the Cretaceous.
They did not evolve. Neither one evolved at all, okay? Never did. The moth antenna is unbelievably complex. Just the antenna are more complex than the space shuttle. It is true, and how do we prove
That
it?
wasn't what I wanted to talk about here. I'm popping ahead to it.
But you guys are stuck. You've gagged yourself. Let's see.
Here.
A fossil butterfly. Wait, can you believe it? The fossil butterfly looks similar to today's butterfly.
Right, isn't that fantastic how similar they look while also being very different? What's on the right there is a neuropteran. Those are closer related to lacewings and have a more lacewing-like mandibles and mouth parts because the butterfly and all modern moths have highly specialized feeding apparatuses called proboscis, which is a trunk like an elephant has. So the one on the left is an actual butterfly, modern butterfly, and what's on the right is a neuropteran, a cousin of butterflies, closer related to caddisflies. But yeah, they have completely different mouth parts. So this is actually not making the point you're going to try to make here. And this even says butterfly look-alike.
Remarkable butterfly look-alike lived 50 million years before butterflies appeared. So the Smithsonian said this butterfly evolved before there were butterflies.
Because it's not a butterfly, Kent. It's not a butterfly. It is a neuropteran, close related to lacewings, and has some very specific physiology that you can actually look at when you look at this fossil up close.
Do you stop and think sometimes about what they read or write or say? World's oldest butterfly and moth fossils discovered in pond scums, USA Today. Butterfly fossils and moth fossils are found. Now, the fact that those fossils formed at all indicates rapid burial in mud to preserve them.
Right, yeah. Fossils, Lagerstätten, which is where we find most insect fossils that look like this, are definitely found in mud or in an aquatic environment. That's how they were preserved. The Lagerstätten is the organisms fall into a poor oxygen quality level of a body of water where it's very still. They lay there on the bottom, and over time they are buried by deposition, sediment deposition. And since there's no disturbance and nothing's coming down there to feed because of the low oxygen levels, well, not too much is coming down there to feed. Some things may, but the butterfly or other organism gets sealed in this nice layered fossil, and we are able to pull those out and learn a lot about them because they preserve it in such fine detail. It's called Lagerstätten. But yeah, everything's more complicated than the space shuttle to Kent Hovind. We need to, yes, Mr. Lizard, like Archaeopteryx is a great Lagerstätten fossil. We even find details about their feathers. It's amazing. Good morning, Mark Caesar and Jen with one N. I'm so happy to see all you all this morning, and Nathaniel's back in here hanging out. Creationist logic, God just randomly made moths and butterflies. Yeah, right? That's kind of what the message that we're getting here. Just made two organisms that are very similar, that have very similar genetics and physiological characteristics, but they're not the same kind. But he will say things like whales and dolphins, for instance, are the same kind, even though they have a lot of physiological difference. Maybe he doesn't say that. Maybe he does. Maybe he divides up citizens too. I haven't heard his position on that, but I know he talks a lot about whales. I don't know where he draws his lines there, but that was CreationWatch, just a little snippet of Kent Hovind being very, very wrong about bugs.
Then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the land of Egypt for the locusts, so that they may come into the land of Egypt and eat every plant in the land, all that the hail has left." So Moses stretched out his staff over the land of Egypt, and the Lord brought up an east wind upon the land all that day and all that night. When it was morning, the east wind had brought up the locusts. The locusts came up all over the land of Egypt and settled on the whole country of Egypt. Such a dense swarm of locusts as had never been seen before, nor ever will be seen again. They covered the face of the whole land, so that the land was darkened, and they ate all the plants in the land, and all the fruit of the trees that the hail had left. Not a green thing remained, neither tree nor plant of the field throughout the whole land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh hastily called upon Moses and Aaron and said, "I have sinned against the Lord your God and against you. Now, therefore, forgive my sin, please, only this once, and plead with the Lord your God only to remove this death from me." So he went out from Pharaoh and pleaded with the Lord, and the Lord turned the wind into a very strong west wind, which lifted the rocks and drove them into the Red Sea. Not a single locust was left in the country of Egypt. But the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he did not let the people of Israel go.